Will the real Cinderella please stand up? Americans are taught that the Cinderella story is one of rags to riches. A beautiful girl must only be good, humble, and soon she will be swept off her feet and whisked away to a castle where her prince in order to live happily ever after. In reading older variants of the tale, Cinderella is a noble woman fallen from glory who must find a way to reclaim her status. There is a stark contrast between the two types of tale, Anglo-American and some Anglo-European variants. The differences can be summed up by what scholars call active heroines and passive heroines. It is my belief that Americans are sold the Cinderella passive heroine dream and are not as exposed to their more active heroine contemporaries. In order to determine the difference between active and passive heroines, I will compare Walt Disney's film Cinderella, the variant most Americans are familiar with as adapted from Perrault, with two lesser-known variants, 1660 La France de Friends, The Ash Tree, and 1634 Basile, The Cinderella Cat. I will then shed some light on what may have caused Cinderella as an active heroine to be lost to mainstream literature in the first place. Heroine is defined in Merriam-Webster's dictionary as the principal female character in a literary or dramatic work, the central female figure in an event or period. The word active means characterized by action rather than contemplation or speculation, expressing action as distinct from mere existence or state. In contrast, the word passive is defined as acted upon an external agency, receptive to outside impressions or influences, lacking in energy or will, lethargic, tending not to take initiative or dominant part. Using these definitions, one can conclude that an active heroine is a female principal character in a tale who is active in her story and not just merely there, and a passive heroine is a female principal character in a tale who lacks energy or will to change her situation, but is receptive to other external agencies who impose their own influences and will. A dream is a wish your heart makes when you're fast asleep. In dreams you lose your heartaches. Whatever you wish for you keep. Have faith in your dreams and some day your rainbow will come smiling through. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true. This song is a melodious tune is sung by Walt Disney's Cinderella as she prepares for another day of servitude, and looks longingly at the white castle shimmering in the distant horizon. She tells her bird friends, upon waking up for the day, that she cannot tell them her dream because, quote, if you do it will not come true, end quote. This suggesting that if you wish for it hard and long enough, you will obtain the desires of your heart, and wrapped in a pretty bow, sung in an opening number, that is, quote, the greatest story ever told. But is it really? We meet Cinderella having already lost her mother. Her father, who merely is mentioned as a noble widower, as an honorable widower, and not a man of nobility, was remarried to her stepmother, who, quote, grimly, unquote, wished to future the interests of her own two daughters. Her father also dies, and she is left to the mercies of her stepmother. The opening dialogue states that, quote, she was abused, humiliated, and finally forced to become a servant in her own house, and yet Cinderella remained ever gentle and kind, end quote. Her only friends were the birds and animals on the property, which included the mice she named. These small creatures served as her helpers as she scrubbed, washed, cooked, cleaned, fed animals, and waited on her step-family hand and foot, doing whatever humiliating task they asked and saw fit for her to do. In the 1160 de France La France, the ash tree, two noble families were neighbors and friends. When the wife of one noble became pregnant and gave birth to twin boys, the wife of the second spread gossip that the only way that it was possible was that the new mother had been unfaithful to her husband and that two different men had sired her sons. The wife of the second noble also became pregnant and gave birth to twin girls. Knowing how much of an uprising she caused around the town about her opinion of the presumed infidelities of the first woman, and knowing that she herself had not been unfaithful, she became fearful of what others might say about her own giving birth to twins. She devised a way to hide her shame and that would be presumed about her, and agreed with a servant to have one of her daughters taken away. She wrapped the baby in silk and lace, and tied a gold ring around the bundle, and sent her away with the servant. The servant placed her in an ash tree outside an abbey, where she was found by a porter named Friend, and taken and raised by his daughter as a wet nurse. In Basile's 1634 variant, The Cinderella Cat, a prince's wife died, leaving him with his daughter, a princess named Zezolla, whom he loved above all others. The prince loved his daughter so much that he hired the best seamstress, a woman named Carmesina, to teach her how to do all kinds of stitches. He then remarried the woman who was, quote, fiery, wicked, and demonic, end quote, and did not like Princess Zezola. Because of her dislike for Zezola, she made her life miserable. Zezola, who loved her teacher, went in to complain about her ill treatment at the hands of her stepmother. Carmesina was instructed the princess on how to kill her stepmother and then talked her father into marrying her so that she can give her all the hugs and love that she desired. Zezola happily obeyed, and soon after her father was remarried to her teacher. Carmesina, however, reneged on her agreement and also began to mistreat Princess Zezola while pursuing the interests of her own 6 children. Princess Zezola was forgotten about by her own father and was forced to sleep in the kitchen near the hearth and was called Cinder Cat. In Walt Disney's adaptation, Cinderella and her step-family hear of a royal ball thrown by the prince that all eligible maidens were to attend. With her stepsisters all in an uproar, Cinderella says that she too wanted to go, and her stepmother said that she could if she finished her work, never intending for her to finish. Not knowing what to wear, she hopes to redesign a old dress that belonged to her mother before she died. She could not complete her dress because of the amount of work that she needed to have done, but while she was gone, her animal friends began to sew, cut, and stitch ribbon to old materials that they found around the house, and completed her dress in time for the ball. Seeing that she was ready, her stepmother allowed her daughters to tear the dress to rags, leaving her crying at the base of the tree of the garden. It is where we meet Fairy Godmother, who bippity-boppity boos the heck out of Cinderella and turns her into the belle of the ball. After dancing with Prince Charming all night, Cinderella flees to make a midnight curfew and loses a shoe in the process. She returns to her life of maidenhood, and it is not until the prince goes searching for the owner of the shoe that he finds a perfect match in Cinderella and whisks her away to her happily ever after. Her stepmother and stepsisters are left to watch as she rides away in a white carriage. In the ash tree, Frin is seen by a nobleman named Baron, who takes up residence in the abbey in order to spend time with her. They fall in love and run away together to his home. When Prince Baron falls in hard times, he is advised to marry a woman of stature. A woman named Kudra is chosen, and even though the love of her life is to be wed to another, Frin, being kind-hearted and wanting the best for her lover, helps to prepare the wedding and bedchambers. Because Baron did not have a tapestry worthy to deflower his new bride upon, she lays her own silken tapestry on the bed. When the mother of the bride went to the bridal chamber to inspect the bed, she noticed the silken tapestry and inquires how it was obtained. After being summoned, Frin told the story of how she came about the tapestry. Her mother then realized that Frin was her long-lost daughter, and told her husband the story. The father rejoiced in his new daughter. Her sister's marriage to Baron was annulled. Frin and Baron were remarried, and her father gave them half of his wealth. Kudra was then married to another nobleman, and they lived happily ever after. Basile Zazola, now Cindercat, was told by a dove that if she ever needed something to send a dove to the dove of the fairies in Sardinia, and whatever she requested would be answered immediately. Her father, the prince, decided to go to Sardinia and asked all his daughters what they wanted. When Zezola had her turn, she asked that he send regards to the dove of the fairies and asked her to send her something. She said that if he forgot, he would not be able to move forward or backward. Upon leaving his trip, and after securing his stepdaughter's request, the prince could not leave the port, so he sent word by way of the dove of the fairies, who gave him a date tree, a golden pail, a hoe, and a silk cloth for Zezola. She planted the tree and took care of it every morning and evening, and after 4 days a fairy came out and asked what she wished. When the feast day arrived, Zezola ran to the tree and said the poem to be dressed. The king was there and fell in love, and they danced, but she returned home before she was noticed by anyone. This happened multiple times, always evading the king until the king decided to make his servant follow her. He pursued her so relentlessly that she lost her patent while fleeing. When the king received his news, he threw the party for all the eligible women in the land and used it to try to match the patent to the women who wore it. Zola was found the owner of the patent. The king married her, leaving her stepsisters angry. When comparing these tales, there is a distinct difference is noticed between the American Cinderella and the Anglo-European Frin and Zezola. One of the first differences is the fact that all 3 women, Cinderella is the only heroine who is not of noble birth. Frin is the daughter of a great noble, and Zezola is a princess. This distinction aids in the erroneous American belief that Cinderella is a rags to riches story. Because Cinderella came from humble beginnings, she had nowhere to go but upwards. All Cinderella was required to do to obtain her happily ever after was to dream, wish, hope, and stay nice. With these ingredients, the happily ever after was more than ready, and her true love, and prince, would almost quite literally fall at her feet while professing his undying love for her. She never had to do anything but her chores. She did not even have to ask her friends to prepare the dress, nor did she summon fairy godmother. Everything just appeared for her and fell into place. This is the Cinderella that Jane Yolen describes Americans as being seduced by when she says, quote, "The American Cinderella is partially Perrault's. The rest is spun sugar caricature of her hardier European and Oriental forebears who made their own way in the world, tricking the stepsisters with double talk, artfully disguising themselves, or figuring out a way to win the king's son. The final bit of icing on the American Cinderella is concocted by the master candy maker Walt Disney in the 1950s. Since then, the American Cinderella has been a coy, helpless dreamer, a nice girl who awaits her rescue and patience in a song." End quote. In contrast to the sugary sweet Walt Disney confection, Frin was born in nobility. She was given away at an early age in order to hide the sins of her mother. Although she was not mistreated like the others, it was her good nature and humility that won the love of Baron. She moved to his home and became the lady of the house, and when times were hard, she was willing to sacrifice her love for him and allow him to secure his future. She was still involved in the preparations of his home and wedding for his new bride. Her nobility was discovered because of her selflessness and her sacrifice of love, and she was renewed to her being by being restored to nobility and being able to secure her husband's good fortune. From the beginning, Zola tried to secure her happiness by plotting and killing her stepmother and securing a position with her teacher Carmesina to marry her father. Because she was mistreated, the fairies decided to allow her to ask for a wish. Zola had to work by cultivating the tree, what would become the key to her salvation. She also had to say a type of poem incantation in order to obtain the results. After doing this multiple times, she caught the eye of a king and was restored to nobility by becoming queen. Both Frin and Zola had to either sacrifice and work or to restore themselves to greatness in what is not a rags to riches story, but a story of what Yolen calls a tale of redemption. This erroneous perception has actually robbed the American public of the true meaning of the fairy tale. She reiterates this when she says, quote, "To make Cinderella less than she is, then, is a heresy of the worst kind. It cheapens our most cherished dreams, and it makes a mockery of the true magic inside us all, the ability to change our own lives, the ability to control our own destinies." So how has this passivity become popular? Why are American girls so indoctrinated in Come-Upp's tale of Cinderella while her active cousins have been forgotten? Well, according to scholars, this would have occurred in multiple different ways. Jane Yolen mentions the fact that Walt Disney's variant grossed $4.247 million with his first release, which, quote, "opened the floodgates to Disney Cinderella books," end quote. Because of this, the market was able to be flooded with Disney's variant and has become available in stores nationwide. Scholars speculate that the result of this flooding in market began to change the mind of the youth who hear the tales, not much to compare it with. Marcia Lieberman, in her article entitled "Someday My Prince Will Come, A Female Acculturation Through the Fairy Tale," said, quote, "We must consider the possibility that classical attributes of femininity found in the stories are in fact imprinted on the children and reinforced by the stories themselves." End quote. She suggests that girls who considered themselves beautiful could become leery of girls who considered themselves plain, while girls who thought of themselves as plain could become jealous of girls who thought they were more beautiful than they were. To her, marriage was the ultimate goal of the fairy tale ending, and young readers would begin to shape themselves through the light of the fairy tales that were reared on. Quote, "Since the heroines were chosen for their beauty and not for anything that they do, they seem to exist passively until they are seen by the hero or described by him. They wait and are chosen and are rewarded." End quote. In her article, "Someday My Prince Will Come, Disney's Heterosexual Imagery in Animated Film," Carrie Coakley says that the youth of the post-Disney, quote, "the belief is that you just wait long and hard enough and wish and dream, and eventually the dreams will come for you." This puts forth the notion that it is natural for women to want to be married and consumed not only by their dreams, but it also spills over into their waking thoughts as well. She goes further in to contrast the passive female and active male by saying the male character announces to the audience that he is going to marry the particular girl, and that one the one of his dreams. The females, on the other hand, are forced to wait for the man of their dreams to come and take them away in an unbearable situation, held up as true love. However, the model is rarely viewed as anything less than perfect. End quote. When girls sit down and listen to a fairy tale